Just, okay, now we are live. Nice. Are you seeing the PowerPoint, the presentation?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So let's start. I begin by asking Ago, Laroye, Exu, asking for the blessings of the elders and the blessings of the youngers. Ago, Ago. My greetings and thanks to the board, Danica, my main advisor, Leno and Nina, the examiners and co-advisors watching us from Brazil, the colleagues online, family and friends all around the planet. I decided to keep this presentation as simple as possible since, as you will see, the subject is enough complicated. So I will present a PowerPoint slideshow to guide my talk and present some pictures and videos. But I insisted to be present in a space related to the subject. So I'm here at Bauhaus Library, and you are all over the world. So let's start. What I'm going to say here today is not only the explanation of what is recorded in the book of my thesis, but can also be understood as a complementation of this complex artwork. I am present here today in the present time, while what is recorded in the book is like a photograph of long exposure that recorded over 8 months all the changes that the research suffered as well as the changes I suffered. Of course, the result is very blurry, but also very beautiful. The weirdness of walking on a path that is made under our feet at every step without us knowing where we are going and losing sight of where we came from is exactly my feeling right now, a feeling which I'm glad to share with you all. When I started to narrow my interests for the research proposal, I thought that my object could be the small collection of candomblé phonograms that has waited for me since the 1930s to cross my path in a kind of magical way here in the Germany of the 21st century. But in fact, even before this master's program, my research interest has been on the question, what is power? And I still find myself thinking about it whenever I hear about heritage or legacies of any kind, especially when it comes to objects of art and culture, in which it's not possible to measure, access, or transfer the inscribed values of the objects without completely emptying them of the things that gave these values to these objects in the first place. So when I was confronted with the fact that a very valuable heritage, to which I am very directly related in many aspects, had been transformed into an ethnographic object and was stuck inside an archive of a German museum without anyone being able to access it, without any information about it, and without any identification of any kind, and without any of the values that gave it meaning, it seemed to be my obligation to work for the reconstruction of the memory of and this history in favor of my people. And that had to follow my seek for understanding. Why then do the archives archive? And here I call archive all the institutions that deal with the safeguarding, maintenance, and diffusion of cultural heritage, be it museums, archives themselves, galleries, libraries, universities, cultural centers, etc. In short, places of discourse, places of narrative emission, places of power. But it was only on the path of trying to unravel the mysteries around this collection of phonograms, like how they were recorded, where, by whom, and how they ended up in Germany without anyone in Brazil knowing about them, that I realized that the question of power is again the center of my research. Today, having already walked all the way up to this point, I realized that my main object was never in fact the phonograms or their content, but the power relations that mutually generate the process of construction or destruction of a memory, and the process of construction or destruction of an oblivion. The relationship between these places of memory and the procedures of engagement with the past and the history is a power-based relationship. In other words, the power to control a narrative. And that's why the archives archive, and that is the object of this work. I am an artist and also a researcher, so I place my work in the not so recent field of the artistic research, which means the production of knowledge based on the practice, expertise, and multidisciplinary understanding proper to contemporary art, a way of thinking, understanding, and transmitting knowledge that does not need to be explained to be apprehended. So instead of writing a dissertation about one of my artworks, I made the dissertation an artwork itself, starting from this premise of the artistic research as one of the new artistic strategies applicable in a transmedia work such as this. And it's transmedia because it's composed of several parts in different media and with different contents in each part, so that is impossible to apprehend it in its totality by accessing only one or other of the parts that compose it. In the first chapter of the book, I make this historiographic, sociological, and political commentary on the constitution of museums as we understand them today, according to the globally spread European and Eurocentric perspective. So starting from the well-known Hellenic myth of the foundation of the Museion, Zeus, king of the gods, disguised himself as shepherd, attracted Mnemosyne, the titan of memory, and had with her the 9 daughters, the 9 muses of arts and sciences, in which Clio, the favorite one, is the muse of history, who holds in one hand the stiletto of writing, and in the other hand the trumpet of fame, sharing with her mother the gift of remembering, but also sharing with her father the powers of coercion, seduction, and deception. And then I follow the European history, discussing how the institutionalization of the sciences in the passage from the 18th to the 19th century canceled the previous dialogue between history and literature in the Western world, and then consolidated the hierarchy between the representation of the real over the representation of one possible, or the passage from the imagination to the image. Also, how the physical, written, and impersonal testimony became more important than the personal oral testimony, which means even if the written is false, it became a proof of an event in detriment of the truth transmitted orally. In other cosmovisions, it's quite the opposite, where the narration of a happening is the very function of an individual destined to be the holder of this communication technology and the ancestral civilizing process. However, in the Western Weltanschauung, the logic of archivation of documents created this notion that memory can be accessed in an allegedly neutral and universal way, and also created this notion that the production of knowledge is centered on the primacy of the vision over the other senses, like writing and reading for sure, but also through the visual fruition of objects that would also guard this knowledge. This kind of understanding of the production of knowledge about the world then met the colonial industry and created the concept of museum as a place for us to go and educate ourselves, to acquire culture, and even better if a foreign, exotic culture with interesting objects to look and understand oneself from the otherness. And from this point on, I elaborate my concept of counter-ethnography, which is my critique of the ethnographic method that ended up becoming, to a greater or lesser extent, both form and content of the social sciences. The intention was to understand the uses that the colonial body makes of these cultural institutions for the purpose of guaranteeing the hegemony of the European epistemological paradigm throughout the world. And this colonial body is equipped with two powerful arms, one stronger, called genocide, and the other longer, called epistemicide. Then, in the second chapter of the book, this counter-ethnography becomes a case study more related to the collection of phonograms that found me here in Weimar. I made sure that my research was not invading the field of musicology, or even worse, to become one more ethnography of candomblé. And when I heard about these phonograms, I asked around if anyone had heard anything about this collection. Then I received the indication that Professor Tiago Pinto, UNESCO chair and head of the Transcultural Music Studies department at the HFM here in Weimar, had already started research about these phonograms. He published an article 16 years ago claiming these wax cylinders phonograms to be the oldest candomblé recordings ever known, and that they are in the Berlin's Phonogram Archive. I searched then in the online database of this archive and couldn't find anything from what I imagined would be the keywords of the search, like candomblé, Brazilian, Bahia, etc. At the same time, I read Professor Tiago's article, which in fact was the only written document I found that referred to this collection, being all the other dozens of publications simply quoting Professor Tiago's text, which says, in 1937, Marius Schneider, Hornbostel's successor, sent a device to Brazil via a Brazilian embassy in Paris, and at the initiative of the then head of the cultural department of São Paulo, Mário de Andrade, the device arrived in Brazil in 1937 and was sent to the singer and guitarist Olga Prager Coelho, who recorded songs of Bahian candomblé. It is the first sound record of this repertoire of which I have news. This is my translation from the original in Portuguese. So I returned to the online database of the archive and found the entry referring to these recordings by the name of Olga Prager Coelho, without any other information identifying this entry as a collection related to candomblé. I found everything very strange at that point and decided to investigate on my own. And nothing more natural than to start from the text of the professor, a person who holds great scientific authority in the field of musicology and intangible cultural heritage, but who did not indicate the sources of this information on the text. A second index card, more detailed, showed that the entry was really about what I was looking for. So I believed in the scientific premise that based on the same data collected, it is necessary to arrive at the same result to prove that the hypothesis is true. So I went to Brazil to collect the documents that would prove who recorded these chants and how they got to Germany. But as I made progress in my research, the initial information made less and less sense. I researched about Mário de Andrade and his role in the cultural department of São Paulo at that time, all the ethnographic missions undertaken by Brazilians and foreigners in Brazil at that time, the occasions in which such recordings could have been in Salvador in the 1930s, a time when the candomblé was still criminalized in Brazil. And I also researched deeply in the biography of Olga Prager Coelho, read interviews, newspapers, articles from 1936 to 1939 to know where she was and what she was doing. And I never imagined that I would arrive in a dead end, but the fact is that none of this information could be confirmed. And as I lacked time to formulate another feasible hypothesis and keep trying to complete this puzzle, I decided to close the investigation for now and register in the book some of my speculations so far, and then attach to the book the organized collection of documents, photos, personal letters, institutional communications, media clipping, bibliography that I have gathered up, which may be useful for future research, mine and others, around this subject or other related ones. I will show you how is the book. Parallel to the construction of the written text, I have made a series of creative process, which I called exercises to not lose myself from my sight, composed of 6 videos, 1 object and 2 performances, one opening and the other closing the series. Some of them can work as independent artworks, but when looked all together, they document my mental and spiritual footsteps in this journey. I will put here muted while I talk so you can see the images. The first episode is the performance Too Many Steps for Too Little Legs, which was a mental image that came to me during a trance in a ritual. I saw myself walking in a place I couldn't recognize, and every time I looked back, I didn't know where I had came from. And when I looked forward, I didn't know where I was going. Sometimes I would look at the ground and see a yellow brick road forming under my feet, but without leaving a trace behind me. Then, in the possible translation of this image, which to me contains a clear message from the Orishas Eshu and Oshun, I painted 3 small wooden platforms in vibrant yellow and went from my house to the Ilm River, foot after foot, walking on this yellow path while I was doing it myself. Before starting, I saluted the guardian of all the paths, and upon reaching the river, I washed my feet in the icy waters of the high German winter. Along the way, which was supposed to last 40 minutes but lasted more than 2 hours, it rained, was windy, snowing, and then at the end opened the sun. And by the presence of all these elements crowning the immense physical effort I undertook, I could only interpret as a positive sign of blessings, which we call alafia. The other videos of these exercises are of different natures and can be accessed from my YouTube page, so I won't play or describe them in detail here, but 2 are recordings of my voice in off from personal reflections made at the beginning of the pandemics, and my insecurity about the decisions made and the methods chosen, and then the impossibility of continuing the research personally due to the lockdown and confinement, etc. And another one is an edition of audio conversations via WhatsApp that I had with Nina when I first informed her of my decisions making in this crossroads of the research. Another episode is still without English subtitles, is the description of an object, a personal archive I have here, where I cataloged my experiences in the realization of this whole set of works that constitute my thesis, which helped me understand what it is to make decisions about where and how a certain object enters an archive. I would take, for instance, one photo, and the same photo, for instance, takes different meanings if filed in the category art or politics or spirituality, and how I was trying to understand how this key role of decision making builds up the whole narrative about one object. And the other two are references, one sent by Leno on mnemotechnical resources for recording and transmitting knowledge, and the other is a short recording of a popular media in Salvador, the Rádio Poste, which ended up being the main reference for the final performance, I Am the Archive, that closes this series. And I put here just for you to understand the sound reference. For I Am the Archive, I shared with Danica my reference of the Rádio Poste of Salvador, very interested in the counterpoints of different understandings of what is knowledge production, knowledge diffusion, and community work among the roles of the griot, the journalist, the historian. And then I decided that a storytelling format broadcasted in recorded audio would be the ideal media for a possible translation of this cacophony of Salvador's environment. And then Danica helped me think of a way to transform this whole experience into a performance. The initial idea was to make an installation on the street, but then Danica idea led me to transform the idea into my own archive and to impersonate the Rádio Poste. The idea was to carry this baggage that contains many sounds of different natures, which would create a narrative that would be my own life baggage, while informing the migrant situation. But I couldn't, however, solve a primordial issue in any performance of walking, which is the route. I wanted to start at the main station, but what would be the final point? Almost 2 years living in Weimar and visiting Ilm Park very often, and I had never seen or heard about the Schlangenstein. One day, going to the river, I came across the statue and immediately remember when I arrived in Salvador and went to meet Mãe Índia, the priestess of Terreiro do Bogum, who opened the Kari oracle and said, "It was Bessem who brought you." Bessem is the snake voodoo, the archetype symbol of wisdom, and also the rainbow that connects heaven and earth. Here we can see some different visual interpretations from different codes or qualities of this deity, but it is always related to the symbol of continuity and permanence, of wealth and fortune. So nothing better than knowing that I was sent by him to fulfill his designs. So for me, it was obvious the walk should start through Weimar's doorway to all immigrants, the Hauptbahnhof, and would end then at the statue of the snake, which became for me one more of the countless signs of Alafia in this journey. And among the visual references that I carried with me along the way, in my body, in the objects that I had in my hands, or in the ones that I attached to my bags, in the small rituals that I performed at the beginning and at the end, as well as inside the boxes that I carried, although not visible, were codes referring to various Afro-diasporic codes from various traditions that take place in South America and the Caribbean. And since it was an artistic performance and not a religious one, these references were not made within the religious precepts, and I want to make this clear here. I was dressed in black, which is a religious taboo, but there were invocations from the spiritual forces that I would like them to accompany me along the way. I will play a video clip with a short video clip with the walk.
Faz vídeos.
Any collection better portrays the collector than the history of the objects transformed into a collection.
Agu laroye. Laroye. Abre os caminhos, Exu. Agu. Vence as demandas, Ogum. Agu. Traz a justiça, Xangô, caô cabecido. Agu. Odé, coromodé. Traz abundância, Odé. Agu. Eu invoco a força das Iabás. Ora e eu. Agu. E parei em ação. Agu. Odoia e Emanjá. Agu. Saluba nanamborongo. Yayalode. Agu. Babá. Agu babá. Oba luaie. Atoto babá. Epa babá. Agu Oxalá. Dá-nos paz, Oxalá. Traz a paz, Oxalá. Traz a paz, Oxalá. Traz a paz, Oxalá.
Now, closing the presentation, I'm going to the end. I'm going to show a little bit of what is perhaps the most controversial part of my whole work, but I think is what gives it the greatest meaning. At some point during this whole journey, I decided that it was necessary to make the direct and informal restitution of the audios to whom I believe to be the moral heirs to this heritage, and I had two main concerns. How to know to whom to return it, since nothing is known yet for sure about how the phonograms were recorded. And it was imperative to me that this restitution should not be done by institutional means. First, because it would take centuries, and would get in the line with countless requests for repatriation, with all the obstacles, disputes, and impossibilities this implies. And second, that taking the phonograms from one institution in Germany to arrest them again in another institution in Brazil seemed illogical, although I do not discard a future attempt in this sense. And for the academic purpose of this presentation, it would be very good if I had the means to scientifically explain the methodology behind my decision to hand over the copy of the phonograms to the community of Terreiro do Bogum, but this is impossible. I found no concrete or unquestionable information that the audios I took to Bogum in any way belonged to Bogum, or that they were related to Bogum in any way. Something told me I was right, and from the little I could understand of what is sung in some of the chants, it seemed to be related to the Jeje tradition, one of the oldest, most important, and most secretive nations in the constitution of Candomblé as a religion in Brazil, with an ethnic origin that goes back to the populations that formed the ancient kingdom of Dahomey. I showed the audios to some people from different strands of the religion, and many of them could not recognize, although they said it sounded familiar. Then, with the blessings of the Orishas, who answered me positively in the oracle, I took a plane, went to Salvador, and showed the sounds to Maindia, still at the table of the Kari oracle, right after she told me that Bessem took me there, and she not only recognized the songs, but she sang along. Alafia. I will explain later how my decisions was made to go against the legal rule of property rights to hand over in an unauthorized way copies of these phonograms to the community they refer to, taking from these objects the status of mere ethnographic objects by returning them to the context that gives them meaning. Although there is plenty of room for us to discuss who is, in fact, the owner of the rights over an intangible heritage that registers not only an artistic cultural content, but also the liturgical content of a religious community. In addition to the moral and author rights involved, and before putting myself to the judgment of this examination board, of the colleagues, and of the public that is watching, I would like to leave the following issue: what to do when the law is unjust. And I will give 3 quick examples besides mine of when activism encounters artistic strategies in trying to answer these questions. The field of arts and culture today has relied very heavily on the decolonial discourse to increase its relevance in such troubled times we are living. We can see this discourse present in countless institutions, from the most underground and recent to the most mainstream and traditional institutions in all parts of the globe and with different approaches. But there are real deadlocks in relation to people and actions that propose to move from the colonial discourse to the colonial practice, challenging people and institutions of authority. Nora Al-Badri, an artist of Iraqi descent, together with the German Jan Nikolai Nels, they entered the Neues Museum in Berlin in 2015 and 3D scanned the Nefertiti's bust clandestinely. The museum already had the data of this scan in high resolution for 7 years before, but they never made it public. This bust, as is known, was found in an excavation and stolen from Egypt in 1913 by the German archaeologist Ludwig Borchardt, with the permission of France, who colonized that land. Since the following year, the 1914, Egypt had made numerous requests to return this relic, and all of them were denied, which makes the Egyptian statue of Queen Nefertiti never been exhibited in Egypt because it went from the excavation directly to be the most valuable cultural asset of Germany. Nora and Jan from this clandestine scanning released the data during a hacker conference along with the video of the performance, and immediately they went viral. The data set was downloaded and shared countless times by people all over the world who made all kinds of uses of the data set. And the artists themselves made a life-size 3D print of the statue and exhibited for the first time in Cairo. After the exhibition, the artist buried the copy in the desert sands as a counteract to the first excavation. The museum threatened to sue the artist for theft of intellectual property. The other example is Thierry Su, a Beninese artist and teacher. He commissioned from the sculptor Elias Boko a replica of the throne of King Beranzin, the last of the kingdom of Dahomey, which now is Benin, a 77 centimeters tall chair with a U-shaped seat excavated from a single trunk of the sacred tree of Iroku. He took this a replica, Rome to Alada in 2015, and buried it along with other objects on his family's land near the area where the historic royal palace once stood. And he waited 1 year and then communicated the discovery to the archaeology department of the University of Abomey Calavi, which sent its students to an official excavation. After the excavation and the artifacts had been collected by the university, Osu communicated that everything was just a performance, a contemporary art experiment that sought to discuss the emptying of Africa's riches from these procedures of the Western science, concepts of authenticity, heritage, history, and the post-colonial historical political trajectory. And the university demanded Osu not to exhibit the throne as an object of art, which he has accepted. And he also faced some conflict with the government. And the 10th Berlin Biennale only showed the other excavated objects and the photo and video documentation of the performance. And currently, the real throne of the King Beranzin is under diplomatic dispute between France, who has the original in custody in Quai-Branly Museum, and Benin, which demands its immediate return to the country. In June of this year, 2020, the Congolese revolutionary Mwazulu Diwaibanza Siwalemba entered the Quai-Branly Museum in Paris with a team of 4 comrades and made an attempt to take back the body funeral pole that was on display with his own hands. And let me put here for you to see. Oh, sorry. 3 of the occasions. It's working? I don't know. Okay.
Les vassaux de toutes les nations, de toutes les tribus.
Mwazulu made the live broadcast of the action through his Facebook page, where you can see him taking the pole off the display, walking all over the museum, carrying the pole, and talking about the reasons for his actions and the intention to take the artifact back to Africa. Last week, on September 30, he and his fellows faced the court for the attempted theft of this artifact, which had international press coverage, including a live broadcast from the Deutsche Welle, and an interview for the New York Times, a documentary for Vice, etc. 2 weeks before the court, Mwazulu went to the Netherlands and made an attempt to restore a work on display at African Museum. He managed to leave the museum with the statue in his hand, but was intercepted on the street by the police, was arrested, and then deported back to France.
Sorry, we are running out of time.
Okay, I'm very, very, very close to the end. Can I or I end here? Okay. For my part, what I did was something much less spectacular, but I believe was quite effective. I was accepted among the community of Terreiro do Bogum and handed over the phonograms directly to the priestess, Mãe Índia, and then to other members of this congregation. And after this direct restitution to Bogum community, I conducted a campaign via WhatsApp in Candomblé-related groups of Bahia, asking that the audios should be shared to as many people as possible, with the intention of spreading them throughout the whole Povo de Santo, as we call it in Brazil, so it would never again be possible to take them out of circulation. Because of the number of times the post came back to me in different groups of different social networks, I believe that the goal was accomplished. As I think it's not clear, somehow clear, my work has a perfectly defined starting point, but it is a chain of issues that does not end, but goes up in a spiral, always returning to the same point, but never in the same place, like the incessant movement of Bessin. In the end, the encounter with these phonograms pushed me so deeply into understanding the procedures of the narrative control and the sophistication of the mechanisms of neocolonialist exploitation, that sometimes I have the feeling that although my ancestors were very reserved and very suspicious of foreigners, they sang these songs just to be recorded like this, just to be kept away like this, so that I would find them like this, just to drive me deeper and deeper in this search for the reconstruction of what has been destroyed and for the destruction of whatever stands in the way of our destiny. Alafia. Thank you very much. That's it. Sorry. Sorry for the time.
So I would like to open up the discussion. So Nina or Leno, do you want to start, or who wants to start with the questions?
So let's go. Thank you, Danica, for your words. Thank you very much, Suelen, for your wonderful presentation. It's an honor for me to be here. Ago Laroye. I'm specifically happy to be in interlocution with your process, because as you said, in a spiral, you have been moving around in between oceans and lands and bringing to us this complex network, which is your action in the world. It's your mission, and our mission is to follow you and to discover the following path that will be opened through this work that it's so important and so urgent and essential to the understanding of what is heritage, what is archive, what is a library, what is a museum, as a mnemonic device, but also as a colonial, mostly case in our reality in Occidental part of the world, as power tools of control and maintenance of a very unjust reality that it's for centuries been implemented by a very Eurocentric perspective of what is culture and what is knowledge. So that said, I would like to just introduce to you something that Suelen passed by, which is very important for our interlocution, which is the question of digital decolonization and repatriation materially of the objects. Thierry Ossou and Nora Al-Badri, for example, are artists, incredible artists that we were analyzing together, and I'm happy to see them in the thesis. Nora Al-Badri was with me last year in the Frankfurt Book Fair meeting we were invited by Goethe Institute International to be talking about what is digital decolonization via open data. And we both together tried to raise a discussion that I would like to bring here to complement somehow in a very small point, which is the importance of the counter-ethnography as a fundamental methodology of construction of a new way of relationing between nations, cultures, and specifically in between governments and institutions. This is extremely essential to the following steps. We cannot talk about justice without talking about it. As a white man, I'm carrying in Brazil the history of the occupation of Portuguese, the invasion, the murder, the raping, the looting, and all the procedures that were implemented and that made our institutions, that made what we understand today and what we transfer for the next generation as culture. And it's time to stop it. And it's time to reconfigure together what we should do with this collection. It's a shame for us in Brazil, the way that we treat until last week the patrimony, the heritage of candomblé and capoeira and different cultural expression of several nations from antiquity in Africa, and even worse, from the owners of these lands, the indigenous, more than 200 nations in Brazil. And they were still locked down in a police museum until last month. And now, happily, this patrimony, this heritage is being taken into the Republic Museum. And this is what we are talking about. I want to bring this example, which is the movement Free Our Sacred, which is a very important movement in Brazil right now in between different realities and actions and institutions in order to cooperate and to integrate some actions to reconfigure the relation between publics and heritage. And this is what we need to do worthily, largely, and urgently. So related to the work of Suelen, I would like to say that the art field and the public art way of methodologies and ways of implement really actions in the public sphere, they are very specific tools for this process. And we need to be carrying together this process of rebuild and renovate the ways that this heritage is appropriated by the population. So Nora with the Nefertiti, for me, it's an incredible example of what we can do together with the art field, together with artists and researchers that will be with communicologists, as I am representing here the University of Rio de Janeiro in the Schools of Communication and the Museum of Science Technology of the federal government in Brazil. We need to be creating strategies, operations, proposals to this heritage. And this is, for me, the way that we will be giving some steps in the direction of a construction of a new methodologies of approaching the heritage educational programs in museums, in libraries, and in archives. So I would like to thank you very much, Suelen, for thinking about it so deeply in your work. It's for us a reference now. I will be very happy to be spreading around not only the phonograms that deserve and is part of the heritage of people from terreiros in Brazil, but also your very quite new words about it. And this is what it means. Like, you had the access through Bauhaus-Universität to be able to implement this work, and now you are making new heritage.
New heritage, that's important.
And this, for me, is the key of mnemonical approach for your work. You are not making a piece of art. You are making a network of art. And this, for me, is what is contemporary art.
And this old heritage will actually live further through your new heritage, through
exactly.
you know, as a part
because
of
it's not the material
work in your research.
Sorry, it's not just only about the material repatriation. We need to think about what to do with it and how we spread and make more people aware of it. This is as important as the other part. So I'd like to introduce our discussion in this way. I would like to thank you very much, Nina, for and Nika for the help, the different ways of helping Suelen to build this knowledge edification. And I'd like to hear a little bit about Nina's perspectives now. Thank you very much, Nina, and Danica and Suelen.
Thank you.
Thank you all, and also for Suelen, especially for inviting me. And it's really a great honor. Each day it becomes a greater honor to have been part of this process and to be present here today in this defense. I don't even know how to start.
Maybe a question.
I would say, yeah, just adding to Leno. I have two questions, yeah, but I think it's important to try to express a bit why it's such an honor for me to be here. And it's for so many reasons. For me, for instance, as a white woman, but a Brazilian woman who started to study candomblé, first samba, but also candomblé, Afro-Brazilian traditions, while I was in Germany. I was 14 years in Germany and France, and noticing the problems that was raising for me being so far away, studying and talking about practices that were not in Europe, but were also present in Berlin. As we know, there's a candomblé house in Berlin. And also trying to give legitimacy to this knowledge, to this wisdom, to a practical knowledge, to subjective knowledge inside of academia and through words. So my thesis was about this, about a practical knowledge of candomblé, which is transmitted through experience, and me having this experience. And I had to put things into words, but actually, I must say, I almost envy Suelen for having written and made such a beautiful, and I would say even with blanks, a complete work where you can have not only words, but much more than words, and much more than poetic words, so many different references, so many different images, videos, performances. So this multimedia that I couldn't dare doing at my department, at least at the Free University, because at the end we need to write a written thesis. And so I am very, very proud of Suelen for being not only a great artist, which I already knew, but of becoming today also a great researcher who can not only contribute to this understanding of heritage and of these processes and power relations that are implying our academic and artistic practices, but much more than understand and create theories on it, to transform it. And I think that's the big difference, as Leno also said, to transform it through the art, through a research, through a thesis that is all of that. All the blanks that she brings about are also the richness of her work, not trying to fill these gaps, but seeing that these gaps and the layers that are coming and that are rising are actually more than overlapping, are accumulating and leading us to much broader ways of seeing knowledge, of seeing sciences, of writing theories and transforming practices. So I believe this work really makes this emergent bridge between decolonial or post-colonial discourses and practices. And that's precisely what we are needing right now, because we have many discourses and theories on decoloniality, but we don't know much how to transform it, how to make a thesis be worthy for the communities we work with, for the traditions, for the wisdom we are acquiring, for our own experiences. So in that sense, I have some questions. First of all, I also want to add that this transformation I was concerned at the beginning of the research that it would be too much about Suelen's own self-transformation, which kind of was at the beginning, but now she could really turn this self-transformation into a transformation of society, I think there's no contradiction or controversy on that. It's not an egocentric work she wrote, but much more than that, from her own subjectivity, a work that can change society. So my questions are, I will ask, so the written thesis, do you think, Suelen, this written thesis the book can be of serve for the communities, and how?
Can serve?
Yeah, you're gonna translate it.
Yeah, I'm planning to translate it and also make a presentation just like this in Portuguese. And this script that I read, I also shared with some people that do not, of course, speak English. So as the subject is more related to people in Brazil, the content, not the format. The content is related to us there more. I made this presentation in Portuguese, so some people that are watching us right now could know what I was saying by reading the script that I said in Portuguese. But it's always a challenge for me to think how to work in favor of my people, as I call it, from here, because sometimes I feel in this deadlock of not being able to transform my theoretical and my trip, my mind trip, into something concrete for people there. So this is a current challenge, and in specific for this thesis, I think that the gathering of documents that I made in the attachment is especially rich, because there I could find documents related to the second Afro-Brazilian Congress held in Salvador in 1937. And I found a lot of documents which were never public or publicized, because the archive in the Historical and Geographical Institute of Bahia, they do not have the archive systematized already, so you cannot search by these documents. And as I spent some time there, I already made this search, so I think for all Brazilians or all people researching candomblé in the 30s in Brazil, they already have a good source to look after. So I think in this thesis, besides the concrete restitution of the phonograms, this is the part that I think are most valuable and rich for future research, mine and others in different fields.
Yes, because I think we tend to write theses or scientific papers for an academic audience and for academic peers, but I also find the way you wrote, it's also scientific, but it's not this scientificism where you need to have also the most difficult words in order to express something, but you will be dialoguing with a broader audience as well. So it might be different from other scientific works in that sense. And another question in this sense would be, so you are a rebellion, but you are also very strategic in your rebellion. So I think you are reconciling the problems you see and you feel in your own body with the gaps of academia, becoming an academician. But I would ask if there could be a conciliation for this injustice you were talking about. what could institutions, museums do? You are doing your role, but what should or could museums and universities do in order to restitute, in order to repair all these gaps and problems?
I think that a first step, but not enough, would be to open the data so we can know what these institutions have in their to open the inventories. So by knowing what they have, we can plan how to act. As far as I could understand, different countries deal differently with this topic, because in Brazil we have a lot of institutions, especially the public ones, the ones related to the government. We have this a policy of transparency in Brazil. So the public institutions, the way they release at least a list of what they have, so we can access it by person or even digitized content in some of them, like the digital National Library, which I find many of my documents. But in other countries, especially the European and much especially in Germany, we do not have means to know what the institutions have. So there is this big movement here in Germany running right now with the scholars of different areas demanding that the public institutions in Germany, at least as a very first step, open the inventory so we know what they have, so we can make our demands knowing what they have, because it's not possible to go there and to search and to dig into the archives. We have to know what they have. So I think from the side of the institutions would be a nice first step to let us know what they have. But I don't think this is enough. I think we have to broaden this discussion and listen from the people, from the Africans who are demanding their artifacts back, from us, from Brazil, which are discovering and demanding our cultural artifacts back, and to listen to the people from which these artifacts were stolen or were taken from. And this is not a forum very well implemented, and especially in Germany, it's not yet, Germany didn't make the first step yet. So I think this would be the ideal first step, but of course it's not enough. The subject is much more deep and broader than just this.
Thank you, Suelen, very much for this one, and thank you guys for this really wonderful reflection on the paper and on her artistic and research work. And we are unfortunately running out of time, and I would suggest that maybe Leno post his questions, and we will unfortunately, and I will also ask just one short question, and then we unfortunately don't have time, for the discussion with the audience. Mm-hmm. And because we have also the next master in 1 hour, so I have to prepare for this as well. It's a kind of like this. So I would suggest just to Leno that you ask your question, and then we will finish this official part and then discuss it then together about the grade.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Danica. We can, for sure, this is a very small discussion, a point in an ocean that we can try to cover after with new proposals of meetings. Let's try to stretch in our conversions. I will be very quick in the sense that I will just point epistemological and methodological procedure of the dissertation writing, which is also a interface, a point in between me and Suelen in our ways of understand science and arts in the methodological approach. there is something very interesting in this zone, which is the ethnomathematical approach to the knowledge, which was important for me in my master, and now I see that it's important also for you. There is an image in your test called "The Beginning of the World According to Choke People" from Kalunga in Zambia. And this is a very interesting relation with the image of the video in Vanuatu that you shown in your presentation today. For the general audience, they are talking about ways of forms of narratives and procedures of translation and transmission and circulation of narratives. So I would like to ask you, Suelen, as an artist and as an artist focusing public art and strategies to public art, do you believe that this is a way of fight against the epistemicide, as we cannot never turn back to something near to erase what happened in the genocide side of the history? Do you believe that ethnomathematical approach is able to establish new ways of transmit the narrative of those objects to new generations?
Absolutely, and good that you brought this point, because when you showed me this and I was looking and searching for ethnomathematics, I found plenty of websites with this content, bringing the geometry, the Sona geometry from Angola, and Vanuatu sun drawings and other kinds of this visual storytelling and ethnomathematics, but all in English. And also some pedagogical material teaching mathematics to European children based on this method. But I couldn't see this application of this method that which is traditional from African cultures to African children. And then I started to think how this excavation and this epistemological sucking of knowledge from Africa operates, because European children are being taught mathematics in a traditional way in which African children cannot have anymore the same opportunity. And this belongs to that children and not to these ones. Not that these children here in Europe should be deprived from this knowledge. It's not the case. But there is some kind of inversion of values, and especially because this neo-colonialist approach to things and to acquire the best of every culture to oneself and live in the original cultures without the people who could teach. I don't know, I'm kind of losing my train of thought here, but I feel that I myself am a very example of this, because I know that I know a lot about our episteme, Brazilian, mixed race, and also African. And I too know a lot about history and European episteme. But I am here in Europe, and I am not there in Brazil helping, or in Africa helping. And this puts me in this place of thinking how Europe is so so attractive to us, and they find means to take us and our knowledge from our land to come here, and this is very good for them and very good for us also, but it's not that good for the places of origin of people and knowledge. And so I put myself also as the same example of the ethnomathematics. I'm kind of an ethno person in this sense, that I am bringing my knowledge from my place of origin to here, and I'm enriching this environment here. And I'm totally aware of this issue, and I think that I'm right in the middle of the challenge of helping solve this puzzle. I don't know if I was clear, but I was trying to connect different points. It's okay. You want to go further?
Thank you very much for this really wonderful work. It was great honor and pleasure to be part of your advisor team and to be somehow part of this process. And I learned a lot from you, Suelen, and that is really and I'm very grateful for this. So I would suggest that we now, that you, because we are really out of time, so I would suggest that you actually go out for a second and Nina, Leno, and me stay in this chat. And then we will call you back in maybe 1 or 2 minutes. Is it okay?
I will close then the broadcast.
Yes, you have to close the broadcast. And thank you. Thanks, everybody. And thanks for this really, really wonderful presentation.
Thank you very much. Just say hi. Gente, eu vou fechar aqui a live. Muito obrigada pela presença de todos, mas agora eu preciso sair e a gente se vê depois na conversa. Um beijo.
Okay, bye.